Most people are not afraid of being alone. They are afraid of what they will discover when there is no one left to distract them. Buddhism teaches that solitude is not a punishment. It is where attachment begins to loosen, the mind becomes clear, and you finally stop begging others to give you what you can learn to give yourself. The moment you become comfortable with your own company, something powerful happens. You stop chasing people who do not choose you. You stop forcing relationships that drain you, and you stop fearing who might leave. Because once you discover that you are enough in your own presence, being alone no longer feels like loneliness, it feels like freedom. 1. Solitude reveals what you have been running from. Most people are not truly afraid of being alone. What they are afraid of is what appears when there is nobody around to distract them. When the messages stop, when the television is turned off, when the room becomes quiet, when nobody is praising you, arguing with you, needing you, entertaining you, or asking something from you, you are suddenly left with something many people spend years avoiding: yourself. And for many people, that is uncomfortable. Silence can feel heavy because silence removes distractions. When there is no noise around you, the noise inside you becomes easier to hear. You begin to notice thoughts you normally ignore. You remember old conversations. You replay moments when someone rejected you. You think about people who walked away. You remember things you wish you had said. You start wondering what others think about you. You may suddenly feel lonely, restless, anxious, or even empty. This is why some people cannot sit alone for even a few minutes without reaching for their phone. They open social media, they check messages, they play music, they watch videos, they call someone, they look for something, anything, that can keep them from sitting quietly with their own mind. But Buddhism teaches that this discomfort can become a doorway to understanding. Solitude is not simply the absence of other people. Solitude can become a mirror. When the outside world becomes quiet, you begin to see what has been happening inside you all along. You notice how quickly you look for attention. You notice how strongly you depend on other people's approval. You notice how much you think about being accepted. You notice how painful it feels when someone ignores you. You notice how often you compare your life with the lives of others. You notice the person you keep thinking about, even though they have already shown you that they do not value you in the same way. You notice how much of your emotional life has been built around being wanted. And this realization can hurt, but discomfort does not always mean something is wrong. Sometimes discomfort means you are finally seeing something clearly. Imagine a room that has been dark for many years. If someone suddenly opens the curtains, the light may hurt your eyes at first. That does not mean the light is dangerous. It simply means your eyes became used to darkness. The same thing can happen within the mind. If you have spent years avoiding loneliness, silence may initially feel painful. But the pain is not necessarily caused by solitude itself. Often, solitude is simply revealing what distraction has been hiding. Maybe you are carrying fear of abandonment. Maybe you are still trying to prove your value to someone. Maybe you are afraid that if nobody is choosing you, you are somehow less important. Maybe you have learned to measure your worth by how many people call you, invite you, praise you, or need you. Maybe you have never learned how to enjoy your own company because your entire life has been centered around other people's attention. These are difficult things to admit. But awareness is where transformation begins. A person who cannot be alone will often make poor decisions simply to avoid loneliness. They may stay in relationships where they are treated badly. They may keep friendships that have become one-sided. They may continue speaking to people who constantly disrespect them. They may forgive the same behavior again and again, not because forgiveness is always wise, but because losing the person feels unbearable. They may accept crumbs of attention because crumbs feel better than silence. They may send another message even after being ignored. They may explain themselves repeatedly to someone who has already decided not to understand them. They may remain emotionally attached to people who have clearly moved on. Why? Not always because those people are special. Often, it is because being alone still feels more frightening than being mistreated. This is one of the most important things solitude can teach you. Sometimes you are not chasing the person. You are running away from yourself. You are running away from the quiet room. You are running away from the empty evening. You are running away from the thought that nobody may call tonight. And because you have not learned how to sit with that feeling, you keep reaching toward people who are not reaching toward you. Buddhist practice encourages a completely different response. Instead of immediately escaping an uncomfortable feeling, observe it. When loneliness appears, do not instantly open your phone. Sit for a moment. Breathe. Notice what is happening. Ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling right now? Do not judge the answer. Maybe you feel sadness. Maybe you feel fear. Maybe you feel rejected. Maybe you feel forgotten. Then ask another question. What is my mind telling me this feeling means? This is where things become interesting. Perhaps the feeling is loneliness, but the story inside your mind is, nobody cares about me. Those are not the same thing. Perhaps the feeling is sadness, but the story is, I will always be alone. Again, not the same thing. Perhaps one person rejected you, but your mind says, nobody will ever choose me. The mind often takes one painful moment and turns it into a permanent conclusion. Buddhist mindfulness teaches you to notice the difference between what is actually happening and the story your mind is creating about what is happening. You can feel lonely without believing you are unlovable. You can miss someone without believing you must chase them. You can feel rejected without deciding that you are worthless. You can spend an evening alone without telling yourself your entire life is empty. This distinction is powerful because once you stop treating every thought as truth, your emotions begin losing some of their control. The feeling may still be there, but now you can watch it. And when you watch something clearly, you begin to understand that it changes. Loneliness rises, then it falls. Sadness appears, then it softens. Anxiety becomes strong, then it weakens. This is deeply connected with the Buddhist understanding of impermanence. Everything changes, thoughts change, feelings change, circumstances change. The painful emotion telling you, I cannot handle this, may feel completely different an hour later. But if you panic every time an emotion appears, you never discover this for yourself. That is why solitude can become training. At first, you may sit alone for 10 minutes and feel uncomfortable. Then one day, 10 minutes becomes easy. You begin taking walks without needing someone beside you. You drink tea quietly. You eat a meal without scrolling through your phone. You sit near a window and simply watch the world. You begin reading again. You begin thinking about your own life instead of constantly thinking about what everyone else is doing. You begin hearing yourself, and gradually, the meaning of being alone changes. At first, you believed being alone meant nobody wanted you. Later, you realize it can simply mean you have time with yourself. At first, silence felt like emptiness. Later, silence begins to feel spacious. You have space to think, space to recover, space to understand what you actually want, space to stop performing for others, space to examine the relationships in your life without fear, space to discover what you enjoy when nobody is watching, space to hear thoughts that were buried beneath years of noise. This is when solitude stops feeling like punishment. It becomes a form of freedom. You begin understanding that you do not always need another person to make a moment meaningful. A quiet morning can be meaningful. A long walk can be meaningful. Cooking for yourself can be meaningful. Reading, meditating, learning, resting, and simply breathing can be meaningful. Your life does not become worthless because nobody is standing beside you. And once you understand that, your relationships begin changing too. You stop chasing people simply because you are afraid of losing company. You stop forcing conversations. You stop trying to convince people to care. You stop confusing attention with love. You stop accepting disrespect merely because you fear starting over alone. You begin choosing people from clarity instead of desperation. That is the deeper power of solitude. It does not teach you to hate people. It teaches you not to use people as protection from your own mind. You can still love deeply. You can still enjoy companionship. You can still want friendship, family, and connection. But now you are not demanding that another person save you from yourself, and that changes everything. Because when you stop being afraid of your own company, the wrong people lose one of their greatest forms of power over you. Their absence no longer feels like the end of your world. Their silence no longer forces you to chase. Their rejection may hurt, but it no longer defines you. You begin realizing that being alone and being abandoned are not the same thing. Sometimes being alone is exactly where you finally meet the person you have ignored for years, yourself. And when you stop running from yourself, you naturally stop running after everyone else. 2. Attachment makes you chase what is already leaving. One of the deepest teachings in Buddhism is that attachment creates suffering. This does not mean you should stop loving people. It does not mean you should become cold, distant, or emotionless. It means you must learn the difference between loving someone and clinging to them. Love says, "I care about you." Attachment says, "I need you to stay exactly as I want you to stay so that I can feel secure." Love allows space. Attachment creates fear. Love appreciates. Attachment tries to possess. Love can accept change. Attachment fights against it. And this is where many people suffer without realizing what is happening. You meet someone, you enjoy their presence. They make you feel seen. They make you feel important. They give you attention. They make your days feel lighter. There is nothing wrong with enjoying that connection. The problem begins when your mind starts saying, "I cannot lose this." Now fear enters the relationship. You begin watching every small change. Their replies become shorter, and you worry. They take longer to message, and you begin overthinking. They seem slightly distant, and your mind immediately creates painful stories. Maybe they are losing interest. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe they found someone better. Maybe they are going to leave me. And the stronger your attachment becomes, the harder you try to control what cannot be controlled. You send more messages. You ask for reassurance again and again. You become overly available. You explain yourself when no explanation was needed. You tolerate things you normally would not tolerate. You lower your standards because you are afraid that having standards might push the person away. At some point, you are no longer simply loving them. You are chasing security through them. Buddhism asks us to look carefully at this pattern. Why does another person's distance create so much fear inside you? Why does someone changing their behavior make you question your own value? Why does another person's decision have the power to completely disturb your inner world? The answer is often attachment. You have connected your emotional stability to something outside yourself, and everything outside yourself can change. That is one of the realities Buddhism constantly points toward. Everything is impermanent. People change, feelings change, circumstances change, relationships change, priorities change. Even the strongest connection will not remain exactly the same forever. This does not make love meaningless. It makes awareness necessary. If you expect anything in life to remain permanently fixed, you will suffer every time reality moves. Imagine holding water in your hands. If your hands are gently cupped, the water can rest there for a while. But if you become afraid of losing it and squeeze harder, the water slips through your fingers. Relationships can work in a similar way. The more afraid you become of losing someone, the more controlling, anxious, and desperate your behavior may become. And ironically, that desperation can create the exact distance you fear. You begin chasing what is already moving away. You keep trying harder while the other person keeps doing less. You keep explaining while they stop listening. You keep reaching out while they stop reaching back. You keep trying to revive something that may already be changing. And because you are attached to how things used to be, you refuse to see how things are now. This is where suffering becomes deeper. You are not only losing the relationship, you are fighting reality. You are arguing with change. You are trying to force the present to look like the past. Buddhist wisdom teaches another way. Observe what is happening without immediately trying to control it. If someone becomes distant, notice your fear. Do not instantly obey it. If the urge comes to send another message, pause. If you want to beg for reassurance, breathe first. Ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid of? Sometimes you will discover that you are not even afraid of losing the person. You are afraid of losing the feeling they gave you. Maybe they made you feel chosen. Maybe they made you feel attractive. Maybe they made you feel important. Maybe their attention distracted you from loneliness. Maybe their presence helped you avoid doubts about yourself. This is why attachment can feel so powerful. You are not always attached only to the person. You may be attached to the version of yourself you became around them. You may be attached to how wanted you felt. You may be attached to the future you imagined. You may be attached to the idea that this person would always be there. And when reality changes, the mind does not only grieve what existed, it grieves what it expected. This is why letting go can feel so difficult. You are not letting go of one person. You may also be letting go of plans, hopes, fantasies, routines, memories, and expectations. Buddhism does not tell you to deny this pain. It asks you to understand it. You can feel sadness without turning sadness into desperation. You can miss someone without chasing them. You can love someone and still accept that they are choosing a different path. You can care deeply without abandoning your dignity. That is real detachment. Detachment does not mean I never cared. It means I care, but I will not destroy myself trying to control what I cannot control. This is especially important when someone repeatedly shows you that their effort has changed. Maybe they stop calling. Maybe you are always the one starting conversations. Maybe they make time for everyone except you. Maybe they only come back when they are lonely. Maybe they give you just enough attention to keep you emotionally attached, but never enough consistency to build something healthy. When you are terrified of being alone, you may accept this for a long time. You keep hoping. You keep waiting. You keep chasing. But solitude teaches you something important. It teaches you that emptiness is survivable. A quiet phone is survivable. An evening alone is survivable. A weekend without them is survivable. The first days may hurt. The mind may keep reaching backward. You may want to contact them. You may remember only the good moments. You may start telling yourself, maybe this time things will be different. This is when awareness matters. Do not confuse craving with wisdom. Craving says, go back because this discomfort is unbearable. Wisdom asks, what happened every time I went back before? Craving remembers the beautiful moments. Wisdom remembers the whole pattern. Craving focuses on temporary relief. Wisdom looks at the long-term cost. This is how solitude makes you stronger. It gives you enough distance to see attachment without constantly feeding it. You begin discovering that an urge can rise without needing to become an action. You can want to message someone and choose not to. You can miss them and still continue your day. You can remember them and still move forward. And each time you do this, something inside you becomes steadier. You begin understanding that feelings are temporary visitors. You do not have to build your life around every feeling that arrives. This is deeply connected to Buddhist mindfulness. Observe the craving. Observe the fear. Observe the sadness. Do not become the craving. Do not become the fear. Do not become the sadness. You are experiencing these things, but they do not need to control your decisions. Eventually, a powerful shift begins. You stop asking, how can I make this person stay? You start asking, Why am I trying to hold someone who wants distance? You stop asking, how can I make them value me again? You start asking, why do I need to convince someone to value what I freely gave? You stop asking, what if I lose them? You start asking, what am I losing inside myself by chasing them? Your sleep? Your dignity? Your attention? Your confidence? Your time? Your self-respect? These questions return you to reality, and reality may be painful, but it is healthier than living inside false hope. Sometimes letting someone go is not a failure of love. Sometimes it is the end of clinging. You can wish them well without following them. You can appreciate what the relationship taught you without trying to recreate it. You can be grateful for the past without demanding that the past return. That is maturity. That is awareness. And that is why learning to be alone changes the way you love. You stop turning love into possession. You stop treating someone's presence like proof of your worth. You stop believing that losing one relationship means losing your entire future. You begin loving with open hands. If someone wants to walk beside you, you appreciate them. If they choose another direction, you allow reality to reveal itself. You may still hurt, you may still grieve, but you do not chase what is already leaving, because you finally understand something important. What belongs in your life should not require you to abandon yourself just to keep it there. 3. Stop asking other people to confirm your worth. One of the most exhausting ways to live is to depend on other people to tell you who you are. Someone praises you and you feel valuable. Someone ignores you and suddenly you feel unimportant. Someone chooses you and you feel worthy. Someone rejects you and you begin questioning everything about yourself. Someone compliments you and your confidence rises. Someone criticizes you and your confidence disappears. If this is how your mind works, then your sense of worth is not really yours. It is being controlled by the reactions of other people, and that is a dangerous place to live. Buddhist wisdom invites us to look closely at this pattern because much of human suffering comes from attachment to identity, approval, image, and the desire to be seen in a certain way. We want people to think we are good. We want them to think we are successful. We want them to think we are attractive. We want them to think we are intelligent. We want them to admire us. We want them to include us. We want them to notice what we do. And when they do not, something inside us feels threatened. But ask yourself a simple question. Why should another person's opinion have the power to decide how you feel about your entire life? Think about how unstable other people's opinions are. A person may admire you today and misunderstand you tomorrow. Someone may praise you when you agree with them and criticize you when you do not. Someone may treat you warmly when they need you and become distant when they no longer do. Someone may dislike you for reasons that have almost nothing to do with you. Maybe you remind them of someone. Maybe they are jealous. Maybe they are insecure. Maybe they misunderstood something you said. Maybe they simply have different preferences. If people's opinions are this unstable, why would you build your identity on them? That would be like building a house on moving sand. The house may look strong for a while, but the foundation is never stable. This is why solitude becomes so important. When you spend time alone, there is nobody there to constantly confirm your identity. Nobody is clapping. Nobody is complimenting you. Nobody is telling you that you are doing well. Nobody is watching. And that is when you begin discovering whether your values are real. Will you still do the right thing when nobody sees it? Will you still take care of yourself when nobody compliments you? Will you still work toward your goals when nobody is impressed? Will you still remain kind when nobody thanks you? Will you still continue improving when nobody applauds your progress? These questions reveal a lot because sometimes we do not actually want growth. We want recognition for growth. Sometimes we do not want to become better. We want other people to notice that we are becoming better. Sometimes we do not even want the life itself. We want the appearance of that life. Buddhist practice cuts through this illusion. It asks you to notice the craving for approval, not to shame yourself for having it, simply to see it clearly. For example, maybe you post something online and then check repeatedly to see who reacted. Maybe someone you care about does not respond, and your mood immediately drops. Pause for a moment. What actually happened? A person did not react. That is all. But the mind may create an entire story. They do not respect me. They are ignoring me. I must not matter. Maybe I am not interesting enough. Maybe everyone is moving on without me. Notice how quickly the mind turns a small event into a judgment about your worth. This is where awareness becomes powerful. Instead of immediately believing the story, observe it. You can say to yourself, "My mind is looking for approval right now." That small sentence creates distance. You are no longer completely trapped inside the thought. You are watching it. And when you watch it, you can begin questioning it. Does this person's silence truly determine my value? Does one rejection erase everything I have learned? Does one criticism mean I am a failure? Does being left out mean I am worthless? Of course not. But when the need for approval is strong, the mind forgets this. This is why some people chase others so intensely. They are not only chasing the person, they are chasing confirmation. They want the person to come back, because their return would mean, I am still valuable. They want an apology because the apology would mean, I mattered. They want a message because the message would mean, I have not been forgotten. They want to be chosen because being chosen temporarily makes them feel complete. But if your worth depends on someone constantly choosing you, you will always be vulnerable. Because people are free to change their minds. And when they do, your entire inner world will collapse. This is not freedom, this is emotional dependence. Buddhism points toward a different kind of stability, not the stability of building a bigger ego and saying, I am better than everyone. That is still attachment. The deeper stability comes from seeing that you do not need to turn every social reaction into a verdict about yourself. Someone can dislike you without you becoming a bad person. Someone can reject you without you becoming unworthy. Someone can misunderstand you without you becoming wrong about everything. Someone can leave without taking your identity with them. This realization changes how you move through relationships. You stop trying to impress everyone. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop changing your personality just to be accepted. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop shrinking yourself so other people feel comfortable. And most importantly, you stop chasing people simply because their distance makes you feel rejected. You begin asking a better question. Am I trying to reconnect because this relationship is genuinely valuable, or because I need this person to prove that I am still worth something? That question can be uncomfortable, but it can also set you free. Sometimes the person is not what you miss. You miss the version of yourself you felt like when they wanted you. You miss feeling chosen. You miss feeling important. You miss feeling needed. And once you understand that, you can begin giving yourself something deeper than temporary validation. You can build a life based on values rather than applause. Maybe you decide that you value discipline. Then practice discipline, whether anyone sees it or not. Maybe you value kindness. Practice kindness even when nobody praises you for it. Maybe you value honesty. Be honest even when honesty makes you less popular. Maybe you value learning. Keep learning even when nobody is impressed by your progress. This is how inner strength develops, quietly, without an audience, without constant approval, without needing to announce every improvement. The person who learns to live this way becomes much harder to control. Flattery loses some of its power. Rejection loses some of its power. Being ignored loses some of its power. Why? Because your identity is no longer being handed back and forth between other people. This does not mean you become indifferent to all feedback. That would be foolish. Sometimes criticism is useful. Sometimes other people see things we cannot see. Wisdom means listening without becoming dependent. You can ask, is there truth in what this person is saying? If there is, learn from it. If there is not, let it pass. You do not need to accept every opinion simply because someone expressed it strongly. This is another place where solitude helps. When you are alone, away from constant social pressure, you can hear your own judgment more clearly. You can reflect. You can ask whether you are living according to your values. You can notice where you need to improve. And you can do this without turning self-reflection into self-hatred. That is important. True inner worth is not about telling yourself you are perfect. You are not. Nobody is. It is about realizing that imperfection does not make you worthless. You can make mistakes and still learn. You can fail and still continue. You can be rejected and still remain whole. You can be misunderstood and still know your intentions. You can be alone and still have a meaningful life. This is where the chasing begins to stop. When someone withdraws attention, you no longer immediately run after them to recover your sense of value. You let their actions speak for itself. If a conversation becomes one-sided, you stop forcing it. If someone repeatedly ignores you, you stop begging to be noticed. If someone only values you when you are useful, you begin seeing the relationship more clearly, not with anger, with awareness. Because once you stop needing everybody to confirm your worth, you become more selective about whose presence you allow into your life. You no longer need a crowd. You need honesty. You need mutual effort. You need respect. And if those things are absent, solitude no longer feels like a punishment. It can feel healthier than staying where you are constantly trying to prove that you deserve basic consideration. This is the deeper lesson. Your worth cannot safely depend on the mood, attention, approval, or opinion of another person. Those things change too quickly. Learn to know yourself in the quiet. Learn what you value. Learn what you stand for. Learn where you still need to grow. And learn to continue your path even when nobody is clapping. Because the moment you stop asking everyone else to tell you that you matter, you stop chasing people who make you feel as though you do not. 4. Being alone teaches you the discipline of non-reaction. Many people believe strength means controlling what happens around them. They think being powerful means always having the last word, defending themselves immediately, proving others wrong, or making sure nobody gets away with disrespect. But Buddhism points toward a very different kind of strength, the ability to control your own reaction. This is much harder than controlling other people. Someone ignores you. Your mind says, message them again. Someone criticizes you. Your mind says, defend yourself. Someone becomes distant. Your mind says, find out why. Someone insults you. Your mind says, make them regret it. Someone posts something that triggers jealousy. Your mind says, compare yourself. Someone walks away. Your mind says, chase them before they disappear. These reactions can happen so quickly that you barely notice them. A feeling appears, and you immediately act. Anger appears, and you speak. Fear appears, and you chase. Jealousy appears, and you compare. Loneliness appears, and you contact someone you already know is not good for you. This is how many people lose control of themselves without realizing it. They believe they are making decisions, but often they are simply obeying emotions. Buddhist practice teaches you to create a space between what you feel and what you do. That space may seem small, but it can change your entire life. You receive a message that makes you angry. Instead of answering immediately, you pause. You breathe. You notice the anger. You let the first wave pass. Then you ask yourself, do I actually need to respond right now? That is discipline. Someone becomes cold toward you. Instead of instantly demanding an explanation, you observe your anxiety. You notice the urge to chase. You notice the fear of losing them, but you do not immediately act on it. That is discipline. Someone says something insulting. Your body becomes tense. Your mind creates 10 different replies. But instead of giving them instant access to your emotions, you remain quiet long enough to understand what is happening inside you. That is discipline. This is why solitude can become such a powerful teacher. When you spend time alone, you are forced to observe your own mind more clearly. There is nobody around to constantly distract you from your reactions. You begin noticing how quickly thoughts appear. One moment you are calm, then you remember something someone said 3 days ago. Suddenly you feel angry again. Nothing outside you changed. The person is not even there. The conversation is already over, but your mind brings it back, and your body reacts as though it is happening again. This shows you something important. Much of your suffering is not coming from the event itself. It is coming from the mind, repeatedly returning to the event. Buddhist mindfulness helps you see this process. A thought arises. You notice it. An emotion follows. You notice that too. But you do not need to become completely absorbed in it. You can say, anger is here, instead of, I am angry and therefore I must act. You can say, fear is here, instead of, I am afraid, so something terrible must be happening. You can say, the urge to contact them is here, instead of, I need to contact them. This difference is small in words, but enormous in practice. It separates awareness from impulse, and that is where freedom begins. A person who reacts to everything becomes easy to control. If someone knows that ignoring you makes you chase, they can control you with distance. If someone knows that criticism makes you explode, they can control you with words. If someone knows jealousy makes you insecure, they can control you through comparison. If someone knows silence makes you panic, they can control you by withdrawing attention. But when your reactions become less predictable, manipulation becomes much harder. This does not mean becoming emotionally dead. It means becoming emotionally disciplined. You still feel things. You just stop allowing every feeling to make decisions for you. Imagine someone sends you a cold message. Your first reaction might be fear. What happened? Are they upset? Did I do something wrong? The old version of you may immediately send another message, then another. Maybe you over-explain. Maybe you apologize for something you did not even do. Maybe you start trying to repair a problem that has not even been explained. Why? Because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. But someone practicing non-reaction pauses. They say, I notice that I feel anxious, but I do not yet know what this means. That is a much healthier response. Not everything needs an immediate conclusion. Not every silence means rejection. Not every disagreement means the relationship is ending. Not every criticism requires defense. Not every provocation deserves your energy. The mind wants quick answers because uncertainty makes it uncomfortable. But maturity means learning how to remain steady, even when everything is not immediately clear. Solitude helps train this ability. When you sit alone without constantly reaching for stimulation, you practice remaining present with discomfort. Maybe boredom appears. You stay. Maybe restlessness appears. You stay. Maybe loneliness appears. You stay. Maybe an old memory appears. You stay. You breathe. You observe. You let the experience move through you without immediately running away. This is the same skill you need when dealing with difficult people. The person changes, the situation changes, but the practice remains the same. Notice, pause, observe, then choose. Do not confuse this with passivity. Non-reaction does not mean never taking action. Sometimes action is necessary. Sometimes you need to speak clearly. Sometimes you need to set a boundary. Sometimes you need to leave. Sometimes you need to say, this is not acceptable. The difference is that your action comes from clarity instead of emotional explosion. That changes everything. Imagine two people receive the same insult. The first reacts instantly. They shout. They say things they later regret. The argument becomes bigger. Hours later, they are still replaying it. The second person feels the same initial anger, but they pause. They ask themselves, what response protects my dignity and solves the situation? Maybe they respond calmly, maybe they walk away, maybe they say nothing because they realize the person only wanted a reaction. Both people felt anger, only one became controlled by it. This is the discipline Buddhism develops. Not the absence of emotion, the ability to see emotion without becoming its servant. The same applies to loneliness. Suppose you spend an evening alone. You begin thinking about someone who used to be close to you. The urge comes to message them. At that moment, ask yourself, why do I want to contact this person? Maybe the answer is genuine care. That is worth considering. But maybe the answer is simply, I feel lonely right now. Those are different motivations. If you contact people every time loneliness appears, you never learn that loneliness can pass on its own. You never discover that you can survive an uncomfortable evening. You never build trust in yourself. Non-reaction gives you that opportunity. You wait, you make tea, you go for a walk, you read, you sit quietly. You allow the feeling to exist without turning it into an emergency. An hour later, you may notice the urge has weakened. Now you have learned something powerful. The feeling said, act now. Reality showed you that you did not have to. This is one reason being alone can make you mentally stronger. You begin seeing that emotions behave like waves. They rise, they become intense, then they fall. If you react at the peak of every wave, your life becomes chaotic. You send messages you regret. You return to relationships you already left for good reasons. You start arguments that did not need to happen. You say things that cannot be taken back. But if you learn to wait, the wave eventually loses strength. Then you can decide with a clearer mind. Ask yourself 3 simple questions before reacting. Is this response necessary? Will this matter tomorrow? Am I acting from wisdom or from wounded emotion? Those questions can save you from countless mistakes. Sometimes the strongest response is a calm conversation. Sometimes it is a boundary. Sometimes it is leaving the room. And sometimes it is complete silence. Not every person deserves an explanation. Not every accusation needs defending. Not every misunderstanding needs correcting. Not every person who provokes you deserves access to your attention. There is enormous power in choosing where your energy goes, and solitude teaches you to protect that energy because it teaches you how much unnecessary noise your mind already creates. Once you become aware of your internal noise, you stop volunteering for every external conflict. You no longer feel obligated to answer every insult. You no longer chase every person who withdraws. You no longer explain yourself endlessly. You begin understanding that some situations become weaker when you stop feeding them. A fire needs fuel. So does conflict. So does drama. So does obsession. So does chasing. Remove your reaction, and sometimes the entire situation begins to collapse on its own. This is not weakness, it is restraint. And restraint is one of the clearest signs of inner strength. Anyone can react, anyone can shout, anyone can send the angry message, anyone can chase when they feel afraid. The difficult thing is to remain aware when the mind is demanding immediate action. That requires practice, that requires patience. And that is exactly what solitude can teach you. When you become comfortable sitting with your own emotions, other people lose the ability to move you so easily. Their silence does not immediately become your panic. Their criticism does not automatically become your anger. Their distance does not instantly become your chase. You feel what you feel, you observe it, you understand it, and then you choose your response. That is freedom. Because true power is not making sure nobody ever disturbs you. That is impossible. People will disappoint you. People will misunderstand you. People will provoke you. People will leave. Life will constantly place uncomfortable emotions in front of you. Your power lies in learning that every emotion does not deserve an action. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is feel the feeling, watch it pass, and remain still. The moment you learn that, your mind becomes harder to control from the outside. And when people can no longer control your reactions, they can no longer so easily control you. 5. Solitude helps you see people clearly. One of the greatest dangers of emotional attachment is that it can make you see people as you hope they are, instead of as they actually are. When you desperately want someone to stay in your life, your mind becomes very skilled at creating excuses for them. They ignore you, and you say, maybe they are just busy. They cancel plans again, and you say, maybe they are going through something. They only contact you when they need something, and you say, maybe this is just how they communicate. They disappear for days and return as if nothing happened, and you tell yourself, at least they came back. They disrespect you, but you remember one kind thing they did months ago. They give you very little effort, but you keep focusing on their potential. This is how attachment can distort reality. You stop seeing the relationship clearly because losing it feels too painful, and when loneliness frightens you, even poor treatment can begin to look better than being alone. This is why solitude can become such a powerful teacher. When you learn that you can be alone and still be okay, you begin seeing people differently. You no longer need to make excuses just to keep them near you. You no longer need to rewrite their behavior into something more comfortable. You begin looking at what is actually happening. And that is a very Buddhist practice. Mindfulness is not about seeing what you wish were true. It is about seeing what is present, without adding too much, without removing what you do not like, without letting hope completely replace reality. That sounds simple, but in relationships it can be extremely difficult. Suppose you care deeply about someone. At the beginning, they were attentive. They called you. They asked about your life. They made time for you. They seemed interested. Then, slowly, something changed. The calls became less frequent. The messages became shorter. You started initiating almost every conversation. Plans became uncertain. You felt the distance, but you did not want to accept it. So your mind began searching for explanations. They are probably stressed. They are probably tired. They are probably just busy. And maybe they are. Compassion matters. People really do go through difficult periods. But compassion does not require blindness. There is a difference between understanding someone's temporary struggle and repeatedly ignoring a pattern that has been hurting you for months. Solitude gives you enough distance to notice that difference. When you are afraid of being alone, you may focus on every small sign that gives you hope. One warm message becomes proof that everything is fine. One good evening makes you forget weeks of cold behavior. One apology makes you ignore the fact that the same behavior keeps happening. This is because attachment searches for evidence that supports what you want to believe. Awareness searches for the whole picture, and the whole picture is often more uncomfortable. A useful question to ask yourself is this: if I were not afraid of losing this person, would I still accept the way they treat me? Do not answer too quickly. Really think about it. If you knew with complete certainty that you would be okay alone, would you continue chasing this friendship? Would you keep accepting these excuses? Would you continue waiting for someone who repeatedly puts you last? Would you keep explaining your needs to someone who has already shown you that they do not want to meet them? Would you tolerate disrespect simply because you are afraid of starting over? This question exposes a lot. Sometimes you discover that what you called loyalty was actually fear. What you called patience was sometimes avoidance. What you called understanding was sometimes self-abandonment. Again, this does not mean every difficult relationship should immediately end. Buddhist wisdom is not about becoming cold or suspicious. It is about seeing clearly enough to respond wisely. People make mistakes. Relationships go through difficult periods. Friends sometimes become distracted. Partners sometimes struggle. Family members sometimes fail us. The question is not whether someone is perfect. Nobody is. The question is whether the relationship contains mutual effort, honesty, respect, and the willingness to repair what goes wrong. Look at patterns, not promises. Someone can promise to change, but what happens afterward? Someone can say they care, but how do they behave consistently? Someone can apologize, but does the behavior improve? Words matter. Actions reveal more. This is where many people become trapped. They fall in love with potential. They say, I know who this person could become. But potential is not the same as reality. You cannot build a healthy relationship with a future version of someone who may never arrive. You have to deal with the person standing in front of you now. This is a difficult lesson because hope feels good. Hope keeps us emotionally invested. Hope tells us that if we wait a little longer, try a little harder, give a little more, then maybe everything will become what we imagined. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes people genuinely grow. But sometimes hope becomes a way of avoiding the truth. This is why solitude is so important. When you step away from constant interaction, your mind gets room to settle. You begin remembering the full pattern instead of only the moments you miss. You notice how anxious you felt around them. You notice how often you questioned yourself. You notice how much energy you spent trying to keep the connection alive. You notice that you were always the one reaching out. You notice how relaxed you feel when you are no longer waiting for their reply. This information matters. Sometimes the absence of someone reveals how much stress their presence created. That can be a shocking realization. You thought you were afraid of losing them. Then, after some time alone, you notice that you are sleeping better. You are thinking more clearly. You are no longer checking your phone every few minutes. You are no longer wondering whether you said something wrong. You are no longer trying to earn basic attention, and you begin asking yourself, why was I fighting so hard to keep something that made me feel this unstable? That is clarity, not bitterness. Clarity. Buddhism encourages us to observe without immediately turning everything into hatred or blame. You do not need to decide that the other person is evil in order to accept that the relationship is unhealthy for you. That is important. Sometimes two people are simply not compatible. Sometimes someone can be a decent person and still be wrong for your life. Sometimes someone can care about you and still be unable to give you the kind of relationship you need. You do not need a villain in order to walk away. You only need enough awareness to recognize reality. This is where emotional maturity grows. You stop asking, are they a bad person? You begin asking, is this relationship healthy? Those are very different questions. A person does not need to be terrible for you to create distance. They only need to repeatedly show that the connection is not working. And when you become comfortable alone, you become less afraid of making that decision. You understand that being alone for a while may be healthier than being constantly disappointed in company. You understand that solitude can heal what unhealthy attachment keeps reopening. This also applies to friendships. Maybe you have a friend who only calls when they need something. You always listen to their problems. You always help them. You are always available. But when you need support, they disappear. At first you may say, that is just their personality. But after some time alone, you begin seeing the imbalance. You realize you have been maintaining the entire friendship yourself. That realization can hurt. But clarity is better than illusion. The same thing happens with people who only value you when you are useful. The moment you stop helping, entertaining, solving problems, giving money, giving advice, or providing emotional support, their interest changes. When you are emotionally dependent, you may keep giving because you are afraid they will leave. When you become stronger in solitude, you begin noticing who remains when you stop overperforming. This is one of the quiet gifts of stepping back. You stop forcing relationships, and the truth begins revealing itself. Some people reach toward you, some people do not. Some people notice your absence. Some people only notice the absence of what you used to provide, and you learn from that, without rage, without revenge, without drama, just awareness. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering increases when we cling to illusions. Relationships are no different. If someone has changed, see the change. If effort has disappeared, see that too. If respect is missing, do not pretend it is present. If someone keeps showing you that they do not want the same closeness you want, stop trying to turn their distance into hidden love. See what is. That does not mean you become cynical. It means you become awake. And when you become awake, you stop chasing people based on memories. You stop loving someone only for who they used to be. You stop holding on to a relationship because of what it once gave you. You understand that the past cannot substitute for the present. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. Someone may have once loved you deeply. That does not guarantee they will love you the same way forever. Someone may have once been your closest friend. That does not mean the friendship will remain unchanged. Impermanence touches relationships too, and fighting that truth only creates more suffering. The wiser response is to appreciate what was, observe what is, and stop forcing what is no longer naturally there. This is why solitude gives you power. Not the power to control people, the power to see them without desperation. You stop asking, how can I make them stay? You begin asking, what are their actions already telling me? You stop asking, what if I never find anyone else? You begin asking, why should fear of loneliness make me accept a relationship that keeps hurting me? You stop asking, what if I regret letting go? You begin asking, how long will I regret abandoning myself just to keep someone near me? These questions bring you back to reality, and reality may hurt for a while, but confusion often hurts much longer. When you become comfortable with your own company, you no longer need people so badly that you ignore who they are. You can appreciate kindness without idealizing someone. You can forgive without reopening every door. You can care about someone without giving them unlimited access to your life. You can remember beautiful moments without pretending the entire relationship was beautiful. You can let someone go without hating them. That is clear seeing, and clear seeing is one of the most valuable things solitude can give you. Because once you know you can stand alone, you stop standing beside people who repeatedly make you feel alone, even when they are right there. 6. When you stop chasing, relationships become choices instead of needs. There is a huge difference between wanting someone in your life and believing you cannot be okay without them. At first, those two things can feel similar. You care about someone. You enjoy their presence. You think about them often. You miss them when they are gone. All of that can be natural, but somewhere along the way, care can turn into dependence. You stop saying, I enjoy having this person in my life, and you begin thinking, I need this person in my life, or I will not be okay. That is where suffering begins to grow, because now the relationship is no longer simply a relationship. It has become emotional survival. Their presence determines your mood. Their attention determines your confidence. Their messages determine whether your day feels good or bad. Their distance creates panic. Their silence feels like rejection. Their approval becomes something you constantly seek. And without realizing it, you stop relating to them freely. You begin clinging. Buddhist wisdom encourages us to look closely at this kind of attachment, because anything we believe we absolutely need from the outside can begin controlling us from the inside. This does not mean relationships are unimportant. Quite the opposite. Human connection matters deeply. Friendship matters. Family matters. Companionship matters. Love matters. But connection becomes healthier when it is based on choice instead of desperation. Think about the difference. When you need someone to stay, you may tolerate things you should not tolerate. You may ignore disrespect. You may silence your own needs. You may keep giving even when nothing is being returned. You may become afraid to disagree. You may avoid setting boundaries because you fear they will leave. You may accept less and less just to prevent the relationship from ending. But when you know you can stand alone, your behavior changes. You can still love someone deeply. You can still care. You can still compromise. But you do not have to betray yourself just to keep them. That is the difference between connection and dependence. A relationship becomes much more honest when both people are there because they choose to be, not because one person is terrified of being alone. Imagine two people in the same relationship. The first thinks, if they leave, my life is over. The second thinks, I deeply value this relationship, but I also know I will survive if life changes. Which person is more likely to act from fear? The first. They may become controlling. They may need constant reassurance. They may panic whenever something feels different. They may constantly ask, do you still love me? They may overthink every silence. They may see every disagreement as a threat. The second person may still feel fear sometimes, but underneath that fear there is stability. They know their entire identity does not depend on one relationship. This changes the energy of the connection. They can love without gripping. They can care without constantly monitoring. They can allow the other person to have space. They can communicate honestly. They can say no. They can hear no. They can disagree without immediately believing everything is ending. This is one of the quiet powers of learning to be alone. It teaches you that your life can continue even when someone is not constantly present. Once you know that, you stop trying to force closeness. You stop chasing conversations. You stop creating reasons to contact people who repeatedly show no interest. You stop trying to keep every connection alive forever. You begin allowing relationships to reveal themselves naturally. Some grow, some fade, some return, some end. And instead of fighting every change, you begin responding with awareness. This is closely connected to impermanence. Buddhism reminds us that everything changes. If you enter every relationship demanding that it never change, you will eventually suffer. No person can promise that they will remain exactly the same. You cannot promise that either. Life moves, circumstances shift, people grow in different directions. The question is not, how do I make sure nothing changes? That is impossible. A wiser question is, how do I love without losing myself when change comes? That is what solitude can teach you. It teaches you to have a center of gravity within yourself. Without that center, you may constantly lean on others for stability, and when they move, you fall. But when you have learned to stand, you can lean toward people without collapsing into them. That distinction is important. Some people confuse independence with emotional distance. They think being strong means saying, I need nobody, but that is not necessarily wisdom. Sometimes that is just fear wearing armor. A person who has been hurt may decide never to depend on anyone again. They may become cold. They may reject closeness. They may push people away before people can leave. That is not freedom either. Real strength is not needing nobody. It is being able to connect without making another person responsible for your entire emotional life. You can say, I love you, without saying, you are responsible for making me whole. You can say, I want you here, without saying, you are not allowed to leave. You can say, your presence matters to me, without saying, without you, I am nothing. That is a much healthier kind of love. And it is easier to practice when you are comfortable alone. Ask yourself something. How often have you stayed in a bad situation simply because leaving meant being alone? Maybe you knew the relationship was unhealthy. Maybe you knew the friendship had become one-sided. Maybe you knew you were being taken for granted. Maybe you knew the other person had emotionally left long before they physically left. But still, you stayed. Why? Because the familiar pain felt safer than unfamiliar solitude. This happens more often than people admit. A person may choose predictable disappointment over an empty room. At least the disappointment feels known. But solitude teaches you that the empty room is not as frightening as your mind imagined. You survive the first evening, then the next. You wake up. You continue. You discover routines. You begin sleeping better. You stop waiting for messages that never came. You stop analyzing every word. Your nervous system slowly settles. Then something surprising happens. The silence that once frightened you begins to feel lighter than the chaos you were trying to keep. That is when relationships start becoming choices. You stop asking, "How do I keep this person?" You begin asking, "Is this connection actually healthy?" You stop asking, "What do I need to do so they choose me?" You begin asking, "Are we choosing each other?" That question matters, because love cannot be built by one person doing all the choosing. If you are always initiating, always repairing, always forgiving, always calling, always explaining, always waiting, then at some point you have to look honestly at what is happening. Are you in a mutual relationship, or are you maintaining a connection by yourself? When you are terrified of loneliness, you may avoid that question. When you are comfortable alone, you can finally face it. And sometimes the answer is painful, but a painful truth is still more useful than a comforting illusion. The beauty of becoming comfortable alone is that you no longer have to negotiate with reality. If someone wants to be present, they can show it. If they care, they can participate. If the relationship matters, effort can move in both directions. You no longer need to carry everything yourself. This also makes you a better partner, friend, or family member. When you are not constantly demanding emotional rescue, you can actually see the other person more clearly. You can listen to them. You can allow them to have difficult days without making every mood about you. You can give them space without immediately assuming they are abandoning you. You can respect their individuality. You can support them without trying to possess them. This is healthier for both people. Many relationships become exhausting because one person is constantly asking the other to prove their love. Why did you not reply? Why did you not call? Do you still care? Are you upset with me? Are you going to leave? Sometimes reassurance is completely normal, but if reassurance becomes a constant requirement, the deeper issue may not be the relationship. It may be your fear of standing alone. This is why inner work matters. Another person can reassure you today, but if the fear is still inside you, you may need reassurance again tomorrow, then again the next day. External reassurance can calm fear temporarily. It cannot always heal the root. Solitude helps you meet that root. You sit with the fear. You ask where it came from. You notice the stories your mind tells you. Maybe the story says, "If someone leaves me, it means I am unlovable." Is that true? No. People leave for countless reasons. Compatibility changes, circumstances change, feelings change, priorities change. Someone leaving does not automatically reveal your value. It only reveals that the relationship has changed. That distinction can save you from enormous suffering. Once you understand it, you no longer treat every ending as a verdict against you. You grieve what is lost, but you do not lose yourself with it. This is the kind of detachment Buddhism points toward, not indifference, clarity. You care, but you do not cling. You participate, but you do not possess. You love, but you do not turn love into fear. And when you live this way, your relationships become more genuine. You are not staying because you are afraid. You are staying because the connection has value. You are not giving because you hope giving will prevent abandonment. You are giving because generosity is part of who you are. You are not saying yes because you fear losing someone. You are saying yes because you genuinely want to. And when the answer needs to be no, you can say no without collapsing. This is freedom. It also changes the way you respond when someone pulls away. Instead of chasing, you observe. You may communicate. You may ask what is happening. You may make an honest effort. But you do not endlessly pursue someone who keeps moving in the opposite direction. There is dignity in knowing when effort has become chasing. There is wisdom in knowing when communication has become begging. There is strength in recognizing when love has become self-abandonment. You do not have to prove your value by convincing someone to stay. You do not have to turn every ending into a battle. Sometimes the wisest response is to let people make their choice and then make yours. If they choose distance, you choose acceptance. If they choose inconsistency, you choose boundaries. If they choose not to invest, you choose not to carry the entire connection yourself. This does not make you cold. It means you are finally respecting reality. And once relationships become choices instead of needs, something beautiful happens. You stop holding people so tightly. You enjoy them more. You appreciate the time you have. You become less controlling. You become less fearful. You become more present, because you are no longer constantly asking, "How do I stop this from ending?" You are simply experiencing what is here now, that is much closer to the spirit of Buddhist awareness. Be present. Love what is here. Do not pretend it will last forever. Do not destroy today because you are terrified of tomorrow. And do not destroy yourself trying to keep what has already changed. Learn to stand alone. Then when someone walks beside you, their presence becomes a gift, not a life support system. And that is when connection becomes far more honest. You are not saying, "I need you so I can exist." You are saying, "I can stand on my own and I still choose to walk with you." That is not less love. It is love with less fear. 7. Your greatest power is knowing you can walk alone without becoming bitter. The final lesson is perhaps the most important of all. Learning to be alone is not about becoming cold. It is not about convincing yourself that you need nobody. It is not about cutting everyone off, rejecting love, or treating emotional distance as strength. That is not what Buddhist wisdom teaches. There is a big difference between inner independence and emotional isolation. A person who says, "I need nobody," may sound strong, but sometimes those words are hiding pain. Maybe they were betrayed. Maybe they were abandoned. Maybe they trusted the wrong people too many times. Maybe they decided that shutting everyone out feels safer than being hurt again. But avoiding connection because you are afraid of pain is still a form of attachment. You are still being controlled by what happened to you. Real strength looks different. Real strength says, "I can love people deeply without losing myself in them." Real strength says, "I can enjoy companionship without being terrified of solitude." Real strength says, "I can care, forgive, and remain kind without giving everyone unlimited access to my life." Real strength says, "If someone walks away, I may hurt, but I will not become bitter because of it." This is where solitude becomes something much deeper than simply spending time alone. It becomes a way of learning how to stand within yourself. At first, solitude may feel like something that happened to you. Someone left. A friendship ended. A relationship changed. Your children became busy. People you once spoke to every day stopped calling. A chapter of life closed. And suddenly you found yourself spending more time alone than you expected. The first reaction may be resistance. Why is this happening to me? Why did everyone change? Why am I the one left alone? These thoughts are understandable, but Buddhism encourages us to notice how quickly the mind turns change into a personal punishment. Life changes constantly. People move in different directions. Roles change. Relationships change. Bodies age. Circumstances shift. Nothing remains exactly as it was. The more tightly you demand that life remain the same, the more suffering you create when it inevitably changes. So instead of asking, "Why did life take these people away from me?" you can begin asking a different question. What is this season of solitude trying to teach me? That question changes the entire experience. Maybe solitude is teaching you patience. Maybe it is teaching you that your identity became too dependent on other people. Maybe it is showing you how much of your happiness came from being needed. Maybe it is giving you time to reconnect with parts of yourself you ignored for years. Maybe it is asking you to slow down. Maybe it is simply teaching you that life can still have meaning even when it becomes quieter. This does not mean loneliness disappears overnight. There may still be evenings when you miss someone. There may still be mornings when the silence feels heavy. There may still be moments when you wish someone would call. You do not need to pretend those feelings are not there. Buddhist practice is not about pretending. It is about seeing clearly. You can say, loneliness is here. You can feel it without adding, therefore my life is empty. You can say, I miss this person, without adding, therefore I must chase them. You can say, I wish things were different, without adding, therefore I cannot accept what is happening. That is a very powerful shift. You allow the feeling to exist without allowing it to control the meaning of your entire life. And over time, something begins to change. You stop seeing an empty room as proof that you have been forgotten. You begin seeing it as space. You stop seeing a quiet phone as rejection. You begin seeing it as freedom from constant expectation. You stop believing that every meaningful moment requires an audience. You begin enjoying ordinary moments again. You make your tea slowly. You sit near a window. You take a walk without needing someone beside you. You notice the evening sky. You hear birds you normally ignored. You eat without rushing. You read. You meditate. You think. You rest. These things may seem small, but small moments are where much of life actually happens. Many people miss their own lives because they are too busy waiting for someone else to make life feel important. They are waiting for the message, waiting for the invitation, waiting for someone to choose them, waiting for someone to apologize, waiting for someone to come back, waiting for someone to finally recognize their value. Meanwhile, the day passes, then another, then another. Years can disappear this way. This is why learning to walk alone becomes a form of power. You stop postponing your life until another person arrives. If you want to visit somewhere, you can go. If you want to learn something, you can begin. If you want to sit in a cafe, you do not need to wait until someone is free. If you want to enjoy nature, you do not need permission. You realize that companionship can make experiences beautiful, but companionship is not the only thing that gives experiences value. Your presence matters too. This changes the way you relate to people. When you are no longer desperate for company, you stop holding on to people simply because they are available. You become more selective, not arrogant, selective. You begin asking, does this connection bring honesty, kindness, mutual respect and effort into my life? If the answer is no, you no longer feel forced to keep it just to avoid solitude. This is where many unhealthy relationships lose their grip. A person may have stayed in your life for years because they knew you feared being alone. They could disappear and return. You would still accept them. They could give little effort. You would compensate with more. They could disrespect you. You would forgive quickly because losing them felt worse than losing your dignity. But when solitude stops frightening you, this dynamic changes. You begin saying, I would rather be alone than repeatedly disrespected. I would rather have a quiet evening than spend it with people who make me feel invisible. I would rather have fewer relationships than many relationships built on one-sided effort. That is not bitterness. That is clarity. Bitterness sounds different. Bitterness says everyone is selfish. Bitterness says nobody can be trusted. Bitterness says love is pointless. Bitterness says I will never open my heart again. Be careful here, because pain can easily turn into philosophy. One person betrays you, and suddenly you create a rule about everyone. One relationship ends badly, and you decide all relationships are dangerous. One friend disappoints you, and you convince yourself that friendship is meaningless. Buddhist wisdom asks you not to turn suffering into hatred. See what happened, learn from it, Create boundaries where needed, but do not carry one person's behavior into every future relationship. That only allows the past to continue controlling the present. You can let someone go without becoming hostile. You can accept that they hurt you without spending years wishing them suffering. You can decide they no longer belong in your life without needing revenge. You can forgive internally without reopening the door. That distinction matters. Forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation. Compassion does not always mean access. You can understand that someone has their own suffering and still decide that their behavior is not healthy for you. This is a much wiser form of detachment. You do not need to hate someone in order to release them. You simply stop carrying them everywhere inside your mind. That is where solitude can help. When you are alone, you begin noticing how often certain people still live inside your thoughts. They may have left months ago, but you are still arguing with them mentally, still imagining conversations, still trying to prove something, still hoping they regret what they did. Are you really alone then? Physically, perhaps, but mentally, they are still occupying the room. True solitude is not simply having nobody beside you. It is also learning to release the people you keep carrying internally. When a memory appears, notice it. You do not need to fight it. You do not need to follow it for 30 minutes. You can say, "That happened, it hurt, and now I am here." Return to the present, again and again. This is how the mind slowly releases its grip, not by forcing yourself to forget, by refusing to endlessly feed what has already passed. This is closely connected to non-attachment. You honor the past without living inside it. You appreciate what was good. You learn from what was painful, and then you return to the life in front of you. That is important because your life is happening now, not inside the relationship that ended, not inside the friendship you lost, not inside the apology you never received, not inside the future you imagined with someone. Now, this moment, this breath, this day. Buddhist practice keeps returning you here because the mind is constantly trying to live somewhere else, in memory, in regret, in fantasy, in fear. Solitude gives you the opportunity to come back. And when you learn to come back, you begin discovering that you are capable of carrying your own life. You do not need everyone who began the journey with you to remain until the end. Some people will only walk beside you for a season. They may teach you something. You may teach them something. Then the paths separate. You can appreciate the shared road without demanding that it continue forever. This is one of the healthiest ways to understand relationships. Do not measure every connection by whether it lasts forever. Some relationships are valuable even if they end. Some people help shape you and then leave. Some people reveal wounds you need to heal. Some teach you boundaries. Some teach you patience. Some teach you what love should not look like. And some simply share a beautiful chapter with you before life moves in another direction. When you accept this, endings become less personal. They may still hurt, but they stop feeling like proof that something has gone terribly wrong. You understand that change is part of life. Then your heart can remain open without becoming naive. You can love again, trust carefully, connect deeply. But you no longer hand another person complete authority over your happiness. This is the balance, not isolation, not dependence. Connection without clinging, love without possession, kindness without self-abandonment, solitude without bitterness. And this may be one of the strongest places a person can reach, because now, if someone stays, you are grateful. If someone leaves, you do not collapse. If someone misunderstands you, you do not spend your entire life explaining yourself. If someone does not choose you, you do not chase them until you lose yourself. You keep walking, slowly if necessary, painfully if necessary, but you keep walking. Not because the relationship meant nothing, not because you never cared, but because your life did not end when someone else chose another direction. That is your greatest power. Knowing that you can walk alone without turning your heart into stone, knowing that you can lose people without losing your character, knowing that disappointment does not have to become hatred, knowing that solitude does not have to become isolation, and knowing that your path remains meaningful even when there is nobody beside you for part of the journey. Eventually, you stop looking over your shoulder to see who is following. You stop measuring your life by how many people remain. You stop chasing anyone who keeps choosing distance. You simply continue, with awareness, with dignity, with compassion, and with the quiet understanding that being able to stand alone does not mean you have rejected love. It means you are finally strong enough to love without losing yourself. Being alone is not the absence of love. It is the moment you stop abandoning yourself just to keep others close. When you can sit with yourself, trust yourself, and walk forward without chasing anyone, you become free. Let people come. Let people go. Keep your heart open, your mind clear, and your path your own. Because once you stop fearing solitude, you stop begging for connection.